Hi, and welcome to the Animal Training Academy podcast show, the show for animal training and behaviour nerds, where I, Ryan Cartledge, interview the world's most proficient animal training and behaviour geeks. We're absolutely thrilled and grateful to have you here with us today. So make sure you hit that subscribe button on whatever you're listening to this on so that you don't miss a single episode. Each episode of this show is brought to you on behalf of the ATA membership. And if you like the conversations in this episode, then you're invited to continue them with like-minded behaviour nerds within the membership area, which you can find out more about at www.animaltrainingacademy.com. You'll get access to twice monthly live web classes, the back catalogue of previous web class replays, plus a huge library of videos and projects to help problem solve your training challenges. Plus, we're a sociable bunch with an exclusive private Facebook group and forum areas. It's like a Netflix social media platform for animal behaviour geeks. But we will get started on today's episode where we are going to do something we have, I feel strangely, never done before on this show, and that is invite two guests on at the same time. We'll be talking to both Michael Shikashio and Trish McMillan. Michael Shikashio, CDBC, is the past president of the International Association of Animal Behaviour Consultants, the IAABC, and provides private consultations working with dog aggression cases through his business aggressivedog.com. Michael is fully certified through the IAABC and is a full member of the Association of Professional Dog Trainers, the APDT. He is sought after for his expert opinion by numerous media outlets, including the New York Times, New York Post, Baltimore Sun, WebMD, Women's Health Magazine, Real Simple Magazine, The Chronicle of the Dog, and Steve Dale's Pet World. He is a featured speaker on the topic of canine aggression at conferences and seminars around the world, and he offers a variety of online courses, webinars, and mentorships, as well as having recently started his own podcast show, The Bitey End of the Dog. Trish McMillan holds a Masters of Science degree in animal behaviour and is a certified professional dog trainer, certified dog behaviour consultant, and associate certified cat behaviour consultant. She worked for the ASPCA for nearly 8 years in New York City, and then as a part of their field team, helping assess and rehabilitate dogs from cruelty cases, dog fighting, and hoarding situations. Trish does animal behaviour consulting in Asheville, North Carolina, working with dogs, cats, and horses. She is also a VP of Behaviour and Training at Instinct Dog Behaviour and Training. Her farm, Pebble Hill, is currently home to mostly rescued animals of 5 species. Trish speaks and consults nationally and internationally on animal training, sheltering issues, dog, cat, and horse behaviour, dog aggression, and defensive handling. So without further ado, it's my very great pleasure to welcome both Michael Shikashio and Trish McMillan to the ATA podcast show today. Thank you so much for both of you for taking the time to come and hang out with us at Animal Training Academy again, as you've both been on the show before. So great to have you with us.
Thanks, Ryan.
Yeah, thanks for inviting us back.
Oh, my absolute pleasure. Now, you guy and girl, I always feel weird saying guys. You guy and girl both have a strong working relationship with each other. I feel like I have heard the names Trish McMillan and Michael Shikashio linked together since I can remember. So I'm certain you both must have some super mischievous secrets about each other. Spill the beans. No, I'm just joking. But we would love to know where you guys met and how this collaboration came to be. Can you share some stories with us?
Well, I guess I'll start with this because I always introduce us at our workshops and how we met. And it was from Trish's penchant for copying my pictures on Facebook with her 2 dogs, who looked just like my 2 dogs at the time. So she still has her Lily, which is, I always thought looks like a yellow lab. And I had my yellow lab, and we both had Dobermans, and she started posting pictures on Facebook just like I was. And I started doing a little bit more digging into who this woman was. And she turns out to be someone that was very much into the same kind of things as was helping dogs with aggression issues. And we actually met at an APDT conference in person, and I stalked her there a little bit, and we started talking about all the dog bite pictures that were coming across our Facebook feeds and how there's nothing out there to help dogs with people keep safe from aggressive dogs or dog bite cases. So that's how it turned into this whole workshop, and now it's what it is now. We've been traveling all over before the pandemic, and looking forward to traveling with Trish again.
Yeah, I hope we can get back to it. Yeah, it was funny. The first time we presented together was, what was it, 2016 in, was that New Jersey? I think it was New Jersey. And nobody could believe that we hadn't presented together before because we just tend to riff off each other. And, we're into the same things. We both really have a passion for keeping newer trainers safe. Like in my field, in the shelter field, there are more and more dangerous dogs coming into shelters. Volunteers, new trainers are often not given a whole lot of defensive handling training. So that's something I've been teaching for a while and teaming up with Mike. The thing I love about our workshops is I bring in the shelter people and he brings in the trainers. And we make them all talk together, and the trainers go into the shelters and learn more about working with the shelter dogs, and the shelter people learn more about the training end of things. So I really love this collaboration, and I'm looking forward to bringing it down under in the summertime or the wintertime for you.
Digitally speaking. So putting a timestamp on this, you said your first workshop together was 2016. When did Michael Shikashio, in his words, he might have said it differently, when did he fangirl on you at the APDT conference, was it?
That was probably, it was at least a year before because Mel was there with her baby dog. So we'd have to look that up. We've known each other at least a decade now.
I think I was still like a baby trainer back then, still learning a lot of things. And I got to say, Trish has taught me more about the shelter world and the shelter environments than anybody I've ever been to. She's been like a good sister to me and taught me so much about the shelter environment. And traveling around too, getting to check out shelters with her is like one of the best gifts I could have asked for. So,
yeah, it's been a fun collaboration, sort of. Get it, and I think it's fun for people to hear different voices, like going to a seminar and listening to one voice the whole time. Not to mention it's hard to present and be on for the whole time. So it's been really fun to go back and forth. And Mike always tells me I'm putting the muzzles on upside down, and I always tell him he's putting the muzzles on upside down. So we have a few inside jokes after all these years.
So if you present upside down to the Australasian audience, which you're going to talk about later, what happens to the muzzles then?
I know. I'm going to have to do them Mike's way, and he'll have to do them my way.
So obviously, it's a reinforcing collaboration because your behaviour tells us. So, Mike, you say that Trish is like a good sister. So I'm thinking about my sister. I don't know if I'll describe her as a good sister. I love her, but we have a squabble. I understand that. Are you saying that you guys are like family now? Is that how close this collaboration has become?
Yeah, absolutely. I love Trish like a sister. I would say Trish has traveled with me more around the world than anybody else has in my life. So we've gotten to know each other quite well, and have learned to just enjoy the experiences where we go to. And that's one of the things I again miss about the travel, is being able to go somewhere and just explore the city with Trish or wherever we are and meet new people, make those collaborations. So it's been a really wonderful experience.
Yeah, the other thing Mike and I have in common is we both live with a street dog. So we are both fascinated with the street dogs. Whenever we travel to a country where there are street dogs, we make a point of finding a spot where we can just sit there and dog watch for a while. It's been absolutely wonderful.
Yeah, and I mean, to be the individual whom you've travelled more than anyone else, I mean, you have to get along so well. I can't think of a huge amount of collaborations out there that are as consistent and so hypothetically as reinforcing as working together as you two are, as an example. Ava and Emily come to mind, and they've been doing it for ever. How rare do you think it is to find someone to collaborate with? so well?
Well, they say if you put two dog trainers in a room, the only thing they'll agree on is what a third dog trainer is doing wrong. But I find Mike and I agree on way more than we disagree on, and you know, he's just such a super easygoing guy. It's really easy to hit a new country, hang out with Mike, get to know people, and I can't think of anything we really argue about other than the leash muzzle thing.
So what do you like if we were going to come and see Mike Shikashio and Trish McMillan? And I totally agree with you. It's refreshing to get that switch of voice and switch of presenting styles. How would you describe? Let's have you describe each other's rather than you describe yourself. How would you describe each other's presenting styles and the differences and similarities to yours?
You know what? I would say we have actually very similar presenting styles. We actually get that comment a lot. It's how very laid back, non-judgmental, and because we like to invite anybody to our workshops. We don't put ourselves into one camp. We keep it open to all because learning should be open to all, and that's how we've approached it. Just open-minded, being very careful about not alienating anybody. And Trish, I'm sure, could agree. We kind of have that laid back speaking style, non-assuming, and we like to keep the workshops laid back because aggression can be a serious topic, right? And so why add more seriousness to it and more uptightness about it than we have to.
I think another thing we share is a sense of humor, because if you don't laugh about this stuff, you're going to cry. Like, we're talking about aggression, talking about sheltering, defensive handling. We try to keep it light. The thing I love with Mike's presentations is he's really good at finding hilarious videos on Instagram. I don't even know how he does it, but every time we give them a really heavy piece of information, we've got what we call a palate cleanser afterwards. Just here's something funny. Let's not dwell on the horrible stuff too much. There's a lot of great fun things to do with dogs and aggression as well.
Well, I feel like the conversation has been quite jovial so far. Maybe we need a palate cleanser and we need to talk more seriously about each other. I like that term, palate cleanser. And it's working. Mike, you were saying some of your events, you have up to 2,000 people there?
Oh, that was the Aggression in Dogs conference. Yeah, we had over 2,000 attend that. But on average, Trish and I see about 100 people in the workshops when we were doing it live. And we might see more of that when we're online, doing online workshops. So, yeah, it's been a nice attendance so far.
Yeah, it's hard to coach. Like the in-person workshops, we have people break out and go into groups and work with the stuffed dogs, because the other thing we are both very passionate about is giving people the muscle memory. Because you can watch a video on how to hold a leash and you can sit there and go, yeah, I think I got that. But now you've got a dog coming up the leash at you, trying to bite you, and you've got to go back in time and remember, okay, how do I which hand do I... Whereas if you go and practice with a fake dog and somebody's trying to bite you with a fake dog over and over, you can learn those leash shortening techniques. And we're really very passionate about giving young trainers the mechanical skills, and we've tweaked it for the online presentations so that you can practice at home, and we really encourage people to practice along with us.
And how's that transition been going for you? I mean, you're preaching to the choir here. The whole world's had to make this adjustment. But how have you found teaching those skills? Because you talked about teaching muscle memory skills. Has that translated online for you, or have you come across challenges there?
I think we've had some challenges because we can't physically see everybody at the same time on a Zoom meeting. You can only see so many cameras. And I think some people get a little more shy about showing off in front of, or showing their skills in front of everybody who can see that, versus an in-person workshop where we're kind of going around to smaller groups. And so that's been a little bit of a challenge. But I guess one thing that's been nice about it is nobody's getting punched in the face, which can happen when we're doing, there's this one technique where we try to bite each other with the stuffed dog. And if you get bitten by that stuffed dog, so if the stuffed dog touches you, that means you've just been bitten. And it's this technique called the straight arm, where you're actually trying to get the dog away from you to avoid the dog bite. But by virtue of doing that, when you push your arm out to the side really quickly and somebody's bending over to try to touch you with that stuffed dog, a lot of times people get punched in the face. So we started to add this disclaimer, please don't be that person that gets punched in the face, and make sure when you're leaning over with a dog that you're not putting your face right in direct path of a fist with a leash in it. So that's the nice part about the online part. Nobody's getting punched in the face.
Yeah, I would like people to be less shy about showing the videos. That's frustrating to me as a control freak dog trainer. I want to see everybody do every technique, and I want to watch them, and I want to fix, because you think you've got it and you might be holding the leash upside down. The other thing that doesn't work as well on Zoom is we used to have stuffed dog fights when we got into how to break up a dog fight section. And that was my personal favorite, is having people with stuffed Melissa and Doug full-size dogs, like trying to bite each other's dogs, and trying to learn the different techniques to break up a dog fight safely. That's hard to do by yourself with your one dog at home. So we just have them bite the corner of the couch and practice the moves on that.
Yeah, it's always a fun thing to think about. Somebody walking into the workshop not knowing what we're teaching, and just seeing a bunch of full-grown adults playing with stuffed dogs like that.
Oh, that would be hilarious. Yeah, we have to put out disclaimers too when people post things on Instagram, because just these are defensive handling techniques. These are fake dogs.
Well, yeah, your attendees' partners wondering why the side of the couch is soaking wet because your attendees have been biting on it. Positive reinforcement, aggressive dog conference. You might get punched in the face. There you go. You got to take
Won't happen on Zoom during our Upside Down conference in July.
How many workshops do you think you've done together now over 5-6 years?
I've lost count.
I would stab at maybe 60 or 70, 12 different countries, I think.
Yeah, I mean, we were doing 9 or 10 a year, sometimes more. So yeah,
what countries have you been in?
Oof, we've been to Chile and Mexico, and where else have we been? Colombia. And Canada. Yeah. Did we do it in Australia? No, we haven't done it in Australia yet. We didn't do that. We were going to.
We have both been to Australia to speak at different conferences at very close to the same time, but we did not manage to put on an aggression conference there. We would love to be sponsored to stop in New Zealand and do one, and then go to Australia. Once the world opens up, that would be wonderful.
So like 10 years from now. No. Hopefully in a couple of years. hopefully this year. That would be amazing.
Yeah.
What's your favorite workshop you've ever done together, and why?
I think Colombia was the best. I think that was just, in terms of exotic location, making do with what you have, the extreme enthusiasm of the participants, to the point that we had to calm them down so they didn't hurt themselves with the fake dogs. I think that was just a hoot. The whole thing was just awesome. Yeah,
I would agree. I was just going to say that. It was just really, the setting was beautiful, Ryan.
Oh my God.
We were out in the mountains. So out on the outskirts of Bogota, there's this beautiful mountains, and we went to this dog training kind of center, and there's this just gorgeous mountains, hillside, and just beautiful nature. And we gave the seminar in sort of this shed with, because they had this projector for our presentation. It also had the lumens of like a Scooby-Doo projector from like the 80s. And so it had to be pitch dark in there for anybody to see anything. And so during our seminar, they're draping like these really thick tarps over the kind of thin plastic roof they had in this shed, and everybody was just going with it. The seminar attendees were just like so laid back, and it was such a good time, because the people of Colombia, they were just so warm and friendly, and it was just a great experience, really wonderful.
Yeah, one of the things I love about presenting with Mike is that he's the male part of the couple, and he goes through these very precise positive reinforcement ways to fix your dog's aggression problem. And I am the smaller females as part of the equation, and I show them how to not get bitten by a dog, how to break up a dog fight. So what we're saying is, even if you're a big tough guy, and it was mostly big tough guys in Colombia, you can be gentle and calm and use treats and make your dogs better. And I am saying, as a female, even if you are not huge and don't lift weights all the time, you can still wade in there and break up a dog fight safely if you know these techniques. And at first in Colombia, they were kind of skeptical. And then I showed them the video, and Mike knows the video I'm talking about, where a dog tries to bite me and I evade the bite. And there was a moment of silence, and then there was some applause, and then they listened to me for the rest of the seminar. I'm like, thank you.
So lots of face punching in Bogota.
They were hardcore. They were sliding down.
People were getting dragged down to their off their feet. It was pretty funny.
Yeah, I was afraid for our stuffed dogs.
That's interesting that you bring up female male dynamics of being a team that presents together. In my personal opinion, and I feel one that others share it, in a female-dominated kind of industry, aggressive dogs, you say that there was big macho guys there, that I just find that interesting. I don't really have a question there. I just find it interesting to think about that, like what your feelings are. I guess here's a question: what your feelings are on what your attendees' expectations are, and if they change throughout your presentations.
Yeah, it really depends on what part of the world you're in. The culture of dogs and dog training, it's going to be very dominated by certain demographics depending on where you are. We've definitely seen more male trainers show up in other countries than the US or Canada. So that can make a big difference. And then there's perceptions. There's what kind of information has gone into the culture of dog training. And there's some preconceived notions for sure in what people are expecting. So I don't think they realize until they see Trish and I presenting, how we approach, how, yes, you can use treats to modify aggressive behavior in dogs. A lot of them are expecting that because we don't push a lot of that out in the advertising aspect of it because we don't want to alienate trainers either. And we'd like to, of course, disseminate this information more globally. And we might not be able to do that if we just start saying that in all of our advertising and marketing, kind of shoveling that information out there in that regard. So it's been interesting. And we usually have everybody sold by the end of the weekend because, again, it's just we don't criticize anybody's training style. We don't come out attacking anything. We just present what we know. And then by the end of the weekend, after they see Trish's ninja skills, she's like Yoda, she's like, you would not expect it from watching the videos until you see it, and everybody's just sold when they see that. So it's been great. It's been great making those changes, those ripples, as you would say.
Yeah, and I loved watching Mike sort of take on his project at every seminar. Like there'll be one trainer who comes up and tries to talk his ear off about, well, are you sure you don't need to use a metal collar? Are you sure you don't need to alpha roll this dog? And he just calmly explains how he does things. And, it makes my whole month when I get an email from somebody saying something you taught me saved me from getting bitten. And I bet Mike gets those emails of, I used to use harsher techniques, and now I've learned that you can train aggressive dogs with positive reinforcement.
Yeah, it's cool. I can't imagine Mike anything but calm. Like the picture of calm Mike. You have a very calming voice, but obviously you're human, so I appreciate that. Calm is not maintainable 24 hours a day, 7 days a week throughout your entire life. But I can imagine. I can, like, as you're saying that, I can picture Mike in my head in the small time that we've interacted with each other doing that at a workshop. I would come to a workshop for the content, obviously, but just to watch you guys in action, because I feel like we have a lot to learn from you. So on that note, I'm curious to hear what's the biggest thing that you've learned from each other over the last 5-6 years.
I'll say Trish has taught me a lot about how to pronounce certain words properly, because she does it so gently. She's like, you should probably say it this way, and then I'm like, oh, I've been pronouncing that word completely wrong for 2 years, but Trish corrects me on it. So, and she's got a real wide vocabulary, especially with the technical terms and the science, and she doesn't express it all the time. But Trish actually knows quite a bit about the terminology and the science, and she can she feeds me that information sometimes in the nicest way and corrects some of the inaccuracies that she picks out. So that's what I would say. She's taught me.
Yeah, and I've learned a lot about leash handling from Mike. I have been using certain devices in the shelter and just learning all of the different leash locks. I have to confess, I was one of those terrible people who has been known to wrap a leash around my wrist in the past because you don't want to lose a shelter dog. And Mike has really re-emphasized how important it is to know more than one leash hold and to be fluent with left hand, with right hand, with switching hands. And he's got a brilliant video that he shows of working reactive dog in downtown Mystic, where he does every one of these skills one after another, and just having that fluency. And that's the wonderful thing about presenting these workshops is I have to practice these things because I have to teach them. So I think we've each learned some great stuff from one another, and we love passing it on to the world. And every time we present, somebody comes up with a new technique that we have not seen before, a new tool. We just add it to the workshop and proceed on. There's so much that we learn from the attendees too.
Yeah, it's amazing what we've kind of picked up over the years from especially going to different countries. You see some techniques and things. You're like, wow, I would have never thought of that. But the guys and girls at the ASPCA in New York, when we visited there, amazing handlers. And the people in the big cities, when you want to see some good handling skills, go to the shelters and those kind of the humane societies in those environments. Amazing skills.
Yeah, shelter wranglers. Like you see dogs in the shelter situation that you just will not see as a private trainer. These are the dogs that are brought in because they've bitten somebody. I met a dog at the shelter locally who had killed somebody. I didn't handle it. I looked at it through the bars. There was only one solution for that particular dog, but you do get some very tricky dogs, and somebody needed to get that dog out for its euthanasia. And shelter handlers, boy, they've got some amazing techniques. I have learned so much from the folks I worked with at the ASPCA, the folks I met at New York City Animal Care and Control. There's incredible handlers, and we can learn a lot from them.
Yeah, I think just via the 25 minutes-ish we've been going so far, that you've already demonstrated that there's a lot to learn, and you guys are obviously bringing a lot together. Trish, I'm curious to know, how many times do you actually have to correct Mike?
I haven't done it in a long time. It's usually what I do with Americans is I say, I don't know if this is just the Canadian pronunciation, but here's how we say it in Canada. And sometimes it is just a Canadian pronunciation, and they're like, yeah, no, nobody says it that way here. So it goes both ways.
So I think she's spell checked my entire vocabulary at this point.
Wow, hey, how's your Australasian vernacular?
That's a whole different ballgame.
Let's hear some Aussie words.
Yeah, I used to live in Australia, so I speak Australian pretty fluently. I can flip back and forth, and I've been over there to present, I think 3 or 4 times now. It's one of my favorite places. If just like pay my airfare and I will come and present for you.
Back to New Zealand. What's your can you switch to Australian then for the rest of this episode?
It's more a comprehension and your editor would probably lose it if I used all of my favorite Australian words, because they're all swear words, and
yes,
Aussies are the best at cursing someone out.
They're very different to Canadians.
Mm-hmm. Canadians are pretty sweary too.
Oh, I have stories, but I won't share them on this podcast show. I think they're inappropriate. Now, you, talking about this, have both done something very kind, and that is appreciated, that we are on the other side of the world from you here in New Zealand and Australia, and consequently, unlike things like Clicker Expo, although it was totally worth it, I don't need to get up at 3 a.m. to attend one of your up-and-coming events. You two are working together to both deliver in US times, but also, thank you, in Australasian times as well, your defensive handling and training workshop. Could you kindly share with everyone about this workshop, what it is, why you decided to put it together, and where people can go to find out more about this?
Sure. So it's a 2-day workshop that evolved from our little 45-minute webinar that we did 4 or 5 years ago. Now it's a 2 full-day workshop on defensive handling and training, both in the shelter environments and also in the training world. So it's got benefits for both anybody who works in a shelter, humane society type environment, or trainers. There's something for everybody involved. Veterinary staff also attend our seminars, dog walkers, dog groomers, dog daycare staff. It's beneficial for anybody who just wants to stay safe when working with a potentially aggressive dog, or a dog that has a history of aggression, or a dog you might not know has a history of aggression. There's techniques involved for all. So it's a 2-day, completely online, with coaching from Trish and I. We break out 6 times for leash handling and defensive handling skills that we practice during it. So you're not going to be sitting in front of a Zoom screen, just sitting in your chair for 2 days. There's plenty of time where getting people up and moving and actually practicing these skills. It's really, as Trish had mentioned, it's really important that people get the muscle memory down. And we are doing that from whatever it's going to be, 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. your time, so New Zealand, Australian time. And Trish and I will be up all night, which will be a lot of coffee, but it'll be fun, I'm sure.
Yeah, I think all the Australasians are saying, yes, that's right. Now's your time, North America, to stay up all night. so please know we are grateful for that. Trish, did you have anything to add?
Yeah, I'm just imagining what my animals are going to think watching me up all night with the stuffed dogs showing off stuff. They're going to be completely puzzled. But at least Theodore's probably not going to come in with a dead critter to show y'all.
You never know. It's happened before.
Yes, it happened once.
Yeah, in front of 2,000 people, Ryan. The Aggression in Dogs conference. We were having a cocktail hour with all the speakers, and we're just sitting around chatting, sort of as a panel discussion. And then Theodore shows up on Trish's screen with a dead rat. So,
yeah, you get to know all the farm animals. We've had chickens. We've had chickens walk in. That definitely won't happen on Australasian time. They will be fast asleep. So it should be a good time, though.
Well, that's a shame. We wouldn't want some chickens.
That was actually a comment on one of the feedbacks. Was
we want chickens?
No, too many chickens.
Too many chickens.
They kept squawking in the background on my call, and.
I remember the chickens being there during our last podcast episode, which I found quite entertaining.
I find them hilarious. I love the chickens.
There's always like something happening in your background when we're recording these podcasts.
Yes, there's never a dull moment at Pibble Hill, that is for sure. I mean, and 18 animals and.
And someone else you've collaborated with, Joan. You can pronounce her last name for me because I might butcher it. Rectine. Is that
Joanne Rectine? Yeah,
Joanne.
Yeah. She's been our partner in crime for the workshops for the last few years. So, she's our conference or workshop partner, and she's the one that does all the planning and she does all the behind the scenes magic to get all of this to happen. So, shout out to Joanne for her help in this. And you can actually find all about the workshop on her website, the looseleashacademy.com. And you can sign up for the workshop there and check out all of the other stuff she's hosting as well.
Well, I was worried I was going to butcher her last name, so I'm pretty glad that I got that correct. And Joanne is a long-time member of Animal Training Academy, and the ripple behind this episode today, she reached out and coordinated and set this up. So, yeah, shout out to the Loose Leash Academy, and that's looseleashacademy.com, isn't it? And all the information about not just the safety and handling workshop, but the aggressive dog conference and other events you guys put on?
Yes. Yep. We're going to be announcing the Aggression in Dogs conference for next year, or this year rather, the second conference, I should say, pretty soon. So by the time this podcast airs, we should have that up and running on the site as well.
I hear Wonderful. Theodore might be invited despite his misbehavior last time.
He's a keynote speaker, I heard.
Yeah, he wants to be
the keynote speaker.
He wants to be on a panel about pit bulls.
He's like, can you make a cocktail and rats hour this year, please? Because I felt excluded last year, and you guys say that you don't want to exclude anyone, but here you are.
There are screenshots of Theodore with the rat and a bunch of absolutely horrified other speakers on the Zoom call.
You were just cleansing the palate, right? You're like in some
Yeah.
serious conversation. You're like, hey, Theodore, bring that rat over now. Hey, wonderful. Thank you so much for everything so far. Now, as the listeners of this show know, I'm a bit probably over obsessed with lists on this show, but you've both kindly collaborated on a list for us of your top 6. Here's a New Zealand pronunciation. Things people, I don't know why I keep choosing that number. Things people will learn at your workshop and why they are important for everyone working with aggressive dogs. I can't wait to hear what you guys have come up with.
Alrighty, well, I'll do my 3 and Mike can do his 3. One of the things that I have mentioned a few times is defensive handling, what to do if a dog is trying to bite you, whether they're on the leash or off the leash. And I think that's important for a lot of people. We had just a plain old pet owner come to one of our seminars, and she emailed me and said she broke up a fight in the dog park just with techniques that she had learned from us. So I think sometimes you don't know a dog bite is coming, even if you're just, I only work with house training cases, I only work with puppies, I don't deal with aggression at all. One of the house training cases I went into when I was a baby trainer was a Maltese. I thought easy peasy, walk in there, teach him a little bit about crate training and scheduling. And this was one of the most aggressive dogs that I have ever worked with. And I didn't know that was a problem. They didn't think to have it on leash. And it's really important to know what to do if the client drops the leash, if you're out for a walk with one of the dogs you're training and a dog approaches, if the dog that you're walking decides they want to redirect on you. Super important stuff to know.
Number 1 is defensive handling. There was one?
Yeah, just defensive handling if a dog is trying to bite you, what to do.
Yeah. And so does that mean every new dog you're approaching as potentially going to bite you until proven otherwise?
Well, one of the 7th thing that we didn't have room for is reading dog body language. So I think being able to read whether the dog's likely to bite you or not. But at the same time, I'll pass it over to Mike to talk about the leash handling skills. If you are constantly holding your leash in a way that you could defend yourself if you had to, if it just becomes second nature, that will also save you from a bite. I'll let Mike finish that sentence.
Yeah, so here's the second thing that's really important that we teach in the workshops is these sort of ninja leash handling skills. And I think what's happened over the last decade or so is all of this online learning, which is wonderful. Tons of online learning and options for trainers to learn more about training, behavior, and the theory behind all of this stuff we're doing with animals is great. One of the things that's kind of taken a back seat, though, is especially during the pandemic, now that we don't have a lot of in-person training happening, is the leash skills. And it's a highly underrated tool for staying safe because many of the times we do have a leash on a dog that we're training. Sometimes we have other types of protected contact, which we also cover in the workshop. But leash handling skills can mean the difference between a bite happening and one not happening in so many different circumstances. And that's an important distinction to make. I mean, when I say leash handling skills, when we talk about defensive handling, it's not a training technique. It's a defensive handling technique. It's for what to do to prevent bites from happening and to prevent it if something or is already happening, right? So a dog barking and lunging at a leash towards a particular stimulus or dog jumping up the leash towards you to try to bite you. The leash can prevent a bite from happening because it's all about the time. It's all about the timing of it and buying yourself those milliseconds that a leash can afford you if you're handling it properly. And that's what, unfortunately, Trish and I see a lot of is improper leash handling because it hasn't been taught enough. I think we have got to get back to the foundations of good leash handling. And that's again, a lot of what we focus on. I think we have at least a dozen or so different foundational and more advanced leash skills in the workshop. Everything from how you hold the leash, where you hold the leash, what kind of leash you use for the basics, all the way up to lassoing a dog to put a muzzle on a dog from 6 feet away without even getting close to the dog. So we have all kinds of different techniques that we teach at the workshop. But again, it's all about the time. It's all about those milliseconds. If you hold the leash properly and you know what you're doing with the leash, you can often avoid a lot of dog bites. And we see it. We see it all the time once people start to really pick up the technique.
And I think that's a benefit to both of us, having learned from people in person. I did an apprenticeship, and we're both crossover trainers. We have both learned sort of the old school way first. And I spent a lot of time feeling guilty about being very good with a choke chain. But the other thing that I learned was how to put my hands on a dog if I need to. Back in the days when we used to mold them into a sit, you had to know how to do that without getting bitten. So I think I no longer do any of that stuff, but I really appreciate the fact that I was taught how to do some hands-on stuff. It's not just shaping with a clicker from a distance, and not that that's a bad thing, but I think know how to use the tools that you've got, because sometimes at some point you're going to meet that Maltese, even if you're just doing house training.
Yeah, because when you think about it, Ryan, I mean, a lot of us come from environments, or I know you do, from a protected contact type of context. So we have the luxury of some other barrier in between us and the animal. So animal and enclosure, or some other layers of protected contact. But when we're working with pet dogs, many times your only layer of protected contact could be the leash, and just by virtue of the environments we're working in. So it's important to have those skills, because we're not, we don't have a chain link fence or steel cage in between us and the dog sometimes.
You say it comes down to milliseconds, and is there a challenge that you teach, as you call it, ninja leash handling skills, and it's all we don't want to. Do you want to provide people opportunities to practice these things? Because I'm imagining without the bake dogs to do that, you would need to put someone in a dangerous situation. So how do you bridge that gap, or is there a gap between needing to develop the observation skills to react in that space of time, and getting opportunities to actually build this fluency that you talked about earlier in these skills?
Yeah, it's a little bit of both. We wouldn't want, this is the thing, we don't want people saying, okay, we're going to learn these things in the workshop and then maybe haphazardly practice them, and then we're going to put you in a dangerous situation, or you're going to try to do this when you're in a dangerous situation. That's why it's important to practice. It's the same thing like driving, defensive driving. And we put, you wouldn't just put somebody behind the wheel in a rush hour traffic in the middle of the city for their first time. You gradually work up to that, but you also have to know what to look for when you are driving. And it's the same thing with the dogs we're working with. We have to be aware of when there's a problematic situation arising, and also how to respond. And so, a non-defensive driver is going to be looking at their cell phone. They're going to have one hand on the wheel. They're going to be drinking something with the other hand. They're just not going to be paying attention. And then some big truck swerves in front of them. Somebody that's not, again, a non-defensive driver or a non-defensive handler would not know what to do when that happens. So good defensive handler is going to be aware of the environment and having both hands on the wheel, being aware of what's going on in the environment, but they're also going to know what to do if that truck swerves in front of them. They're going to be equipped with the skills to, turn the wheel in the correct manner, what to do if the car does start sliding, how to use the brakes properly. All of those mechanical skills they would have practiced many times before, so that when something happens in that moment, in those milliseconds, you know what to do. It's just muscle memory. You're reacting accordingly, and to get yourself out of that accident-prone situation.
Yeah, so after the first day of the seminar, we teach them the different leash holds, and then we say, go home, take your dogs for a walk, your personal, nice, easy dogs, and practice and see which is your favorite leash hold, which one works for you. Try bracing the leash in these ways, and you build upon the skills first with a stuffed dog or with no dog at the end of the leash, then with your dog at the end of the leash, and then work your way up. Just like in Canada, the rite of passage to learn how to drive defensively is you go to an icy parking lot where there's no other cars, and you drive and you hit the brakes and you learn how to steer out of a skid over and over and over until when it happens in real life. And it's not an if, it's a when in Canada. And it has happened to me, and that practice pays off. And that's really what we want to get people to learn from our workshop.
Yeah, I guess it's a challenging gap to bridge without being in the situation. I know I'm useless under pressure situations. Like I can learn the logic of doing something, and then the actual event happens, and I'm like, freak out. So I can. You kind of operationalize Mike, and I like the analogy of defensive driving because it's one that we can all relate to. What a non-defensive driver is doing. Could you make that same comparison? What in your mind is a defensive driver doing, and then what does that look like for someone taking a walk or being in a shelter? Can you do the same but on the other end of the spectrum?
Yeah, so if somebody's non-defensively handling their dog, they're going to be holding just the loop end of the leash. So the dog's, got all 6 feet or 2 meters of a leash, or they've got it wrapped around their hand. So they're doing things not safely. They're not paying attention to what the dog is doing. They're not environment. So situational awareness is the key term right there. Situational, being aware of the environment, what might be a problem. So good defensive handlers, for instance, in the shelter environment, they know to look around the corner first. So that's just a simple thing that maybe somebody that's new to handling dog doesn't do. So they don't look around the corner. Next thing you know, another dog's coming around the corner and boom, you have a fight on your hands because they didn't defensively handle the dog they're working with. So really situational awareness. And then they can start to look at body language and the subtleties. And the more they get better at it, the more they're going to notice those little things that happen, like the truck swerving just slightly, or, just the angle of how the shadow in the window, you can see somebody's on their cell phone. Those are the things somebody really picks up on the environment on. And the same thing can happen. Again, the best defensive handlers, it looks effortless. So if you go to those big city shelter environments we were just talking about, and you're watching the staff work with the dogs, it's like watching a really great dancer, somebody that's just really good at their art, and it's just effortless. But you only know what you're seeing until you get trained and you get the eye for what to look for. So kind of that's the same concept where we apply in the workshops. We don't expect anybody to come out of there like a Jedi master, but it's good to if you could just pick up one thing in the workshop, it's, that's going to avoid a dog bite. That's, we're happy with that.
Yeah, one of the things that I teach is how to break up a dog fight. And people are like, well, I don't have fighting dogs at home. Like if you ever have more than one dog in the same space and they both have teeth, you have the potential for a dog fight. And you don't have to know every single technique that I teach off by heart 100%, but if you have the file folder in your brain with the 6 or 7 different things that I've given you, and you can scan your environment and see, okay, yeah, I have that. I could use that piece of wood to put in between the dogs, or I could get this dog on that side of the door, or I could use a leash to back tie this one. If one of them just floats to the top of your mind and it saves you, because the things that we do instinctively when dogs are growling and biting, we are prey animals. We are wired to be scared of the teeth and the growling. And often we panic, and often the things we do, such as putting our hands into the bitey end of the dog and trying to pry the mouth open, that's the worst thing you can do. You do not want your hands near the bitey end. So we teach them to break up the fight by coming in from the back.
I like that. So because even if people learn to do something other than grab mandibles and try to pry open,
please don't.
It's can we generalize that behavior? This is something I struggle with in my life. Like, can I generalize behaviors I learn into like situations where there's different distant antecedents? I'm quite stressed, and with all of that going on, like I kind of revert back to behaviors of reinforcement history, which are the ones that you don't want to do. So Michael, you framed it as situational awareness, and I'm curious, in your guys' opinion, what comes first, the chicken or the egg? Do you teach ninja handling skills, and then that develops into situational awareness, or do you guys spend time trying to frame and teach situational awareness, and does Ninja Jedi Master Michael Shikashio Trish McMillan handling skills like evolve out of that? Does that question even make sense?
It does. I think it can come from either way. Some of the best handlers I've met, or people that are most situationally aware, I should say, are the ones that have owned a dog that's given them problems for a long time. They become really good at knowing where to go with their dog. So the midnight dog walkers term, and they get so good at knowing when and where and what can happen. So those folks are very situationally aware. And then the defensive handling might come, some people can be very good defensive handling. They get the good mechanics, but they just don't. They're not situationally aware. So they learn the techniques really well. They're good at like learning dance moves and things like that. So they pick up all the techniques at the workshop. They just don't know when they have to apply them yet. And so sometimes you get it from either angle, and what will happen is those two things end up meshing together at some point in their dog career because they're going to need it during a high stress situation.
So I can imagine as a facilitator of this information, you've got to read your audience, and then do you therefore adjust based on kind of what you teach, based on how you're seeing where your audience is at?
For sure. That's the art of presenting in a nutshell.
Yeah. So number one's defensive handling. You framed it way better than I just did, Trish. Number 7 was dog body language. Got me hit a little bit. Number 2 was ninja, Jedi master, whatever you want to call it, leash handling skills. We haven't reached number 3 yet, have we? I haven't passed it.
I sort of tripped into a little bit of how to break up a dog fight.
Cool. So number 3 is how to break up a dog fight. Unpack that a little bit more for us, if that's okay.
Yeah, well, like I said, if you've got more than one dog in your household, if a dog runs up to you on the street, even if your dog is not aggressive, even if you don't work with dogs who have aggression issues with other dogs, I think all of us as trainers will see a dog fight at some point in our life, and just knowing the tools to break them up, what techniques you can use if you don't have the tools on hand. Like in the shelter, we want people to have a toolkit with all of the emergency paraphernalia in it, regularly situated throughout the shelter. If you've got a bigger shelter, you don't want to have to sprint over to building C to get the one fight kit. You want to make sure you have them in every ward so that if a fight breaks up, time is of the essence. And if you can get in there and break it up quickly, then maybe there won't be vet bills. Maybe the dogs won't be as traumatized.
Does your fight kit always, no matter the context, contain the same ingredients?
I have a lot of the ingredients in my tiny house right now, just because I have 4 dogs. I live in 160 square feet, which I think is 15 square meters. And I do bring in other people's dogs occasionally. I have friends who bring dogs over. So I have had a fight in the room that I am speaking to you from. And I was really glad I had a break stick handy, because that was the tool that I needed to break up the fight. If you have a house full of Papillons and Maltese, you're probably not going to need a break stick. But if you're running a dog daycare, if you have play sessions at your shelter, I think you're going to need all the tools, because sometimes one will work when another one doesn't.
What else is in your kit? You got your break stick?
Yeah, I have citronella spray, which actually I take the citronella spray when I ride the horses. I put that in my pocket, because there are farm dogs who will come running out, and nobody has bitten the horse yet, but I have rehearsed in my head what I would do, get off the horse, block the dog, hit them up with the citronella spray, and hopefully that will keep the horse safe. And if not, I will smack the horse on the butt and he will run home. And that's sort of my rehearsal of the dog-horse encounter that could very well happen, because I just ride around my neighborhood out here in North Carolina. And I've also got a pet corrector, which makes a really loud hissing noise, and I'm not going to take that on the horse, because that will for sure make the horse gallop off for home. But it makes a really loud noise, and that can sometimes startle dogs into backing off.
Awesome. So number 3, how to break up a dog fight. Before we move on to number 4, did you have anything to add there, Mike?
No, that's just again, our standard disclaimer, all tools are used for breaking up dogfights in emergencies only. We got to always throw that disclaimer out there because then somebody's not paying attention to the disclaimer. Like, how would you use that awful tool, you evil animal abuser? So it's important to remember that these are not training tools.
Given the choice between putting my fingers in the dog's mouth or using one of the tools, I think they're the lesser of the evils. And I think it's important to teach our clients how to do this. I had a client who had a really bad knee that was in need of replacement. She had a husband who was also not super spry, and they had 2 young dogs who were fighting pretty badly. And the pet corrector completely saved them a couple of times. I just said, keep it on the kitchen counter. So that's where a lot of tension was building, and they only had to use it a couple of times. The dogs actually just quit fighting because they were not very good at managing it. They weren't spry enough to easily do the desensitization and counter conditioning part, but they were able to use muzzles on the dogs, and they were able to get to the tool that they could use. Like, you don't want to be putting your hands in it. And sometimes the fights happened outside. Like, they would have had to get down a flight of stairs and race halfway across the yard to break the dogs up. Or they could stand on the porch and hit the pet corrector, and the dogs would be like, nope, we don't fight. So I think if we're working with clients who have dogs who are fighting, it's our responsibility as trainers to teach them how to break up the fight safely. I had a client who broke up a fight by lying in between his dogs while they were fighting. And all 3 of them ended up going for repairs. This was before he met me. And it's really important to be able to teach this to other people too.
Yeah, and I think that's a no-brainer. Mike, you said there that you want to put that disclaimer in there because you're talking about tools that people might confuse with you suggesting they're used as an intentional training tool. Is that something you guys come across? You know, you mentioned that you're both crossover trainers and you're using these tools and you don't mention positive reinforcement, so you're very conscious of who your audience is and who might be coming to your events. And I'm asking this question just aware of this ugly, what I label as ugly us versus them mentality that I perceive in it, and that's Ryan's labels, and Ryan owns that opinion. It may or may not exist. But is that something that you guys come across? I mean, you reinforce for putting that disclaimer there, obviously.
There are lots of disclaimers. Yes. Lots of disclaimers in the workshop.
Yeah, we don't want people thinking because, they use it to break up a dog fight, so then maybe I can use it to train a sit. Or, so it's important we create that distinction. But we do it in person so we can get a feel for the audience. And also, if anybody's maybe thinking that way, sometimes they come out with it and start asking questions. So you get a feel for that particular issue. And it's easier for us to steer them in the right direction when we're in person rather than it being a little bit of information on our advertisement or something like that. It's always better to catch people in person so you can steer that conversation, shape that conversation correctly.
Cool. Number 4.
So number 4, another thing that we focus on is actually how we use positive reinforcement in aggression cases. So I do cover quite a bit about behavior change strategies, and I go through a few case studies in the workshop. And the 2 type of audience members I like to have listen to this are the ones that are coming from a different background of training. Depending on, again, where we are, you'll see a higher frequency of certain types of training backgrounds coming into the audience. And so sometimes I focus on that, where I'm just steering and exposing the information that you can use positive reinforcement in aggression cases. You don't have to resort to punishment. And the other side is when we have a crowd that's mostly using positive reinforcement, I do like to encourage fixing some of the issues and hiccups that you can face in your positive reinforcement training plans, because I think we've shifted very heavily towards applied behavior analysis approaches, which obviously I use in my practice, but that sometimes I've seen shifts people away from other sciences, like understanding ethology, the ethological aspects of working with aggression, understanding motivations, certainly other sciences as well coming into it. We can, you want to make sure we're applying the medical lens on aggression cases, neurological lens. So it's important to bring in other sciences, and that's what I like to also talk about during the workshops. It's not just looking at, let's say, a alternative behavior strategy or a differential reinforcement strategy. We want to make sure we're assessing all of those other things and fine tuning if we need to some of the counter conditioning strategies, because I see sometimes some issues cropping up there if it's used improperly or maybe not. Because there's some subtleties, right? And you know this, Ryan. There's some subtleties when we're working in our training plans that can make all the difference, especially if we're working on classical conditioning strategies. So those are my two audiences I like to cater to, and I will focus on both. And you get a feel, again, depending on where you are, you kind of can tailor the talk to the audience.
And how much of the content is kind of focused on that? And like if you were to break up your 2-day workshop into a pie, what slice of pie would be how to break up a dog fight? What slice of pie would be?
It depends how much Trish lets me talk. we're always arguing about what we. Yeah.
It depends how much Mike lets me talk.
That sounds very
we always have new information, new stuff we want to jam in there. We always talk about turning it into a 3-day workshop. I mean, we could make it a whole week-long workshop seminar because there's so much we want to pack in. So, because I have case studies I don't always get to show, depending on the number of questions we get and what happens. So, it's a good at least 3-4 hours worth of content. All of the training strategies, the behavior change strategies, the management things that apply to working with aggression cases as a trainer, and it of course applies to folks in the shelter environment that are applying behavior change strategies to aggressive behaviors in that environment as well. So, yeah, there's a good deal about how to use positive reinforcement methods in aggression cases.
Yeah, it's funny. This started off as a 40-minute webinar, and then we were asked to present it as a 1-day workshop was it a 1-day or a half day at APDT? I think it was a 1-day.
Oh, that's right. Yeah. Yep.
And I said, I am not presenting at APDT without a test drive. So that was when we went and did the seminar in New Jersey, and it was just so much fun. We kept doing it. But I think by the next year, we had already turned it into a 2-day. We just realized there's so much to know. And of course, you can move ahead and train with either of us separately once you've done the workshop. And if you like how we teach, if you want to learn more from us, we each have mentorships that we do and other projects, webinars, Bitey End of the Dog.
Oh, yeah, tell us about Bitey End of a Dog. Thank you for the prompt. Because I was alluded to the fact that Trish, you actually named Mike's podcast.
Yeah, that's something that I've been saying forever. Anytime I teach about body language, the biggest mistake I see is people are looking at dogs' tails or looking at dogs' hackles. So I'm just like, look at the bitey end of the dog. That's what's going to tell you 90% of what you need to know about what that dog's going to do next. And I have said it so many times that it made it into the podcast.
Yeah, we call them Trishisms. Trish always has these sayings that are really hilarious. And so I stole that from her for the podcast name. And it just kind of, that's what we named it. So, I don't have many Mikeisms. I was thinking about when we're talking about the dog fights, the only Mikeism I have is that people like to latch onto is with sticking your hand in between two dogs. It's like sticking your hand into a bucket of running chainsaws. If you kind of like that analogy. But the podcast has been great. We had last season do extremely well, and I just launched season 2 with Kathy Zadeo for the first episode. And I was, I wasn't even thinking about it. It wasn't even on my radar until Sarah McManaman who's the Muzzle Up Project social media administrator. She runs that for me. And she's like, do a podcast. I'm like, I don't know, podcast, that's different. So I said, okay, let me try it. And it was actually just started recording episodes and bringing guests on, and it's been really a great ride. So, and Trisha's been on last year. Her episode actually has the most downloads out of all the episodes. So,
does it really? Wow.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
It's full of Trishisms. I'm sure it's full of Trishisms. That's probably why.
I can tell you a Mikeism, but when I tell you, you're probably going to tell me that it's just a Trishism. But whatever.
It could be.
Hey, one thing you told the ATA audience, Mike, and I'm sure that's something that you repeat in your workshops as well. Whenever you did a web class with us a couple of years ago, I think, was this metaphor of looking at your dog like a can of gas. And if the can of gas is full, you want to be more conscious of sparks and the proximity of sparks or triggers or cues versus an empty gas can. So that's stuck with me. And I always think of Michael Shikashio when or reference you if I use that. So there's the Mikeism.
That's a Mikeism.
Yeah, I use that. I use that one a lot. I found a lot of people grasp onto that concept of that ism pretty quickly.
There you go. You can claim 2 now.
There you go. I am positive there are more. We'll have people keep track when we do the workshop this time.
Trish's infinite well of Trishisms. Number 5.
Well, I'll pick this one up. I do a module on assessing for aggression. That's something that a lot of us have to do as private trainers. And I look at it from the shelter and like, how do you decide what type of home this dog needs, whether it's safe to adopt out at all, and how do you set the criteria around what's adoptable and what's not in your shelter? So that's a piece that I think everybody can glom onto, because we're all dealing with shelter dogs, whether it's after they're adopted or before they're adopted. And I think understanding how to work with aggression in the shelter, which types of aggression tend to go away in homes, which types tend to get worse, and making ethical decisions around that is something I find myself talking about a lot these days.
Well, you just shared another Trishism, because I've never heard someone say glom onto something. So what you said? Glom onto?
That might be a Canadianism.
I'm using it. I'm taking it.
Okay.
So what is one of the one big takeaway, one big quick tip that you can share for assessing aggression?
One thing here's a Trishism for you. Nobody makes good decisions while they're being strangled. So when you are assessing dog-to-dog aggression in the shelter, it should not be only on leash, on a tight leash, because I'm sure everybody listening to this has met a dog who is a complete idiot on leash with other dogs. And as soon as you drop the leash, they will play.
I think everyone can think about examples from their time that relates to that. Number 5. So I've got one more.
Number 6.
I'll let you say that
Assessing,
number. I always get so nervous as an Australian saying that.
So another thing we talk about in the workshop is assessing prognosis in aggression cases. So what does prognosis mean? It means the potential outcome in a particular case based on a number of variables. Because one of the number one questions the trainer consultant will get is, what is the overall outlook for me? Is my dog savable? Is this dog bad or good? Do I need to rehome? Do I need to consider other options? And there's no straight answer to that without looking at a number of variables. And even then, it's really up to the owner to decide what the outcome is going to be for their dog and what kind of path they're going to pursue, because it's going to be different for every single case, whether it's a shelter case or a dog that's already owned. There's many variables we want to look at when we're assessing the severity of a case. And it's not just the bite history, and there's so many other things. The client's emotional bank account, as Dr. Susan Friedman would say, is how much they have left in the tank to actually keep moving forward is a major assessment we want to make, because some people are all in. They're just like, I am going to do whatever it takes to keep my dog. And other people may have just been bitten by their dog and they're hanging on by a thread in terms of that relationship between the owner and the dog. So that's just one of many, many factors. You got to look at the environment, the manageability, the age of the dog, the sex of the dog, the breed of the dog, the family members, their involvement, the owner's finances, the dog's health. And there's actually 18 things that I discuss in the workshop that'll help trainers help their clients kind of navigate that path and help them make good decisions about where they're going to move forward and what's most realistic. Because for the trainers and consultants listening into this podcast, it's one of the fastest ways to burnout and compassion fatigue is to not be on the same page as your clients. If they have lofty goals and you have goals with that client that are more realistic after looking at all the variables, that's a good way to get burnt out, because you're going to get a lot of clients expecting certain things. They're going to want to take their dog that just maybe killed another dog back to the dog park, or their dog that just bit a child in the face to be a therapy dog at the library. it's just not realistic. And so we've got to make sure we're on the same page as the client. And going through this prognosis, it's such a useful tool for helping clients navigate that path. So definitely an important part of the workshop.
Wow. You know how much I like lists, everyone. So coming up on the next episode of the Animal Training Academy podcast, Mike's 18 things about assessing prognosis. That would be
happy to.
That would be a long episode. Number 1 was defensive handling. Number 2, ninja. I like Jedi Master. I'm going to use Jedi Master. Jedi Master, leash handling skills. Number 3, how to break up a dogfight. Number 4, how to use positive reinforcement in aggression cases. Number 5, assessing for aggression. And number 6, assessing prognosis. Did I get that right?
Yep.
Yes. Thank God for being able to write things down.
And much more, but you made us stick to 6.
and we've jammed that into. I'm pretty impressed with myself refraining from talking too much because we're just over an hour. I'm impressed. Wow. I was like, there's no way we're going to get... Anyway, once again, thank you so much for sharing everything with us today, Trish and Mike, and for coming in and hanging out with us. Just before we do officially wrap up, I know we've mentioned this at numerous times throughout the episode, but can you just remind everyone listening, because there is so much more, where they can go to find out about your events, what you do, and get in touch?
Sure. I'll go first. It's if you want to find out about the workshop, make sure you go to thelooseleashacademy.com. That's where you can sign up for the workshop, as well as the Aggression in Dogs conference that's coming up, which Trish will be speaking at. And you can find me at aggressivedog.com. And don't forget to check out the Bitey End of the Dog podcast. Thanks, Trish, for helping me name that.
Yeah, and I am at trishmcmillan.com if you would like to hire me to help you. I'm doing peer consulting now as well. If a new trainer is taking on a difficult case, I can help talk you through that. I teach an online shelter dog behavior mentorship. And of course, I have Pibbling with Theodore on Facebook if you would like to see the ridiculous stuff my pit bull does when he's not bringing rats to a conference.
I don't know if it gets much more ridiculous than that. And my listeners will not forgive me if we didn't end the show with one more Trishism.
Oh, dear.
Mike, what comes to mind?
Thinking about it, you stole the one about nobody makes good decisions when they're being strangled. It's one of the best ones.
I'm gonna have to think of another one.
And let's call this episode "No One Makes Good Decisions Whilst Being Strangled." Make a note. Episode 141.
There we go.
Hey, this has been so much fun. We're going to link to all of our stuff you just mentioned in the show notes. So from myself and on behalf of everyone listening, we appreciate you making time to come and hang out with us today. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Ryan.
Thanks for inviting us.
We do, of course, really appreciate all of you tuning in today as well. And if you have enjoyed this episode and you were interested in carrying on the conversation about working with our animals in the most positive, funnest, choice-rich ways, then as mentioned at the start of this episode, the Animal Training Academy community is waiting for you. Head on over to www.animaltrainingacademy.com and click on the membership button in the main menu to learn more about what members are describing as the Netflix social media platform for behavior geeks. That's it for this episode though. We're going to wrap it up there. Thanks again so much everyone for listening. You'll hear from us again soon.